Overtime is undoubtedly one of the most exciting situations in all of sports. Two teams battling it out so hard that they're tied at the end of regulation. It makes it so much more intense knowing the importance of every single little decision that's made by a team and its players in those last extra minutes. One mistake and it could be over. But the overtime hasn't always been a part of football, and since it has been, the rules have changed quite a bit. Before the rules were polished, which they still kind of aren't, games could go on for much longer than the allotted 60 minutes, some of which lasted quite a bit longer. An important note before we hop into the longest games in NFL history, before 2017, overtime was 15 minutes long, not 10 minutes like it is today, so the games could go on for much longer because of the extended overtime periods. Alright, so the very first game we have is going to be the divisional playoff game between the Baltimore Colts and the Oakland Raiders on December 24th, so Christmas Eve, for a playoff game in 1977. This is quite a famous game and is often referred to as the Ghost to the Post. With time winding down, the Colts led the Raiders 31-28. Dave Casper, aka the Ghost, caught a 42-yard pass from Ken Stabler, putting the Raiders into field goal range. With only 29 seconds left in the game, the Raiders hit the 22-yard field goal, sending the game to overtime, tied at 31. Despite points being up by at least one team in each of the first four quarters, neither team was able to actually score in the 15 minutes they were given in overtime. And since this was a playoff game, they obviously had to play a second overtime. This time, however, the Raiders had no trouble scoring. Within just 43 seconds of the second overtime starting, Dave Casper caught another pass, but this time it was a 10-yard touchdown, sealing the game for the Raiders. This game had a total runtime of 75 minutes and 43 seconds, landing it as the fifth longest game in NFL history. Jumping 9 years into the future, to 1986, we have our next game between the Cleveland Browns and the New York Jets. Coincidentally, this is another divisional playoff game and has been nicknamed the Marathon by the Lake. The Jets were leading the Browns 17-20 with less than 2 minutes left on the clock. Through a flurry of penalties and a mix of questionable decision-making on this last drive, the Browns were able to get the ball to the Jets' 5-yard line. After a nearly intercepted pass, the Browns elected to kick the field goal, sending the game to overtime. Similar to the game before, there was at least one score in each of the first four quarters, but none in the first overtime, despite the Browns having a chance at a 23-yard field goal, which they missed. After 2 minutes and 3 seconds in the second overtime, Cleveland was able to get the ball to the Jets' 9-yard line. They let their kicker go for his second game-winning attempt, this time from 27 yards, 4 yards further than the one he previously missed. He did actually hit this one, though, giving Cleveland the win 23-20. This game had a total runtime of 77 minutes and 2 seconds, making it the third longest game in NFL history. For our next game, we have the Ravens-Broncos 2013 divisional playoff game, nicknamed the Mile High Miracle. This game was a shootout from the kickoff. Both teams scored 14 points in the first quarter, along with one touchdown each in each of the following quarters. With only 44 seconds left to go in the fourth quarter, the Baltimore Ravens were stuck at their 30-yard line. As I'm sure many of you are aware, Jacoby Jones, getting just 2 catches that game, caught a pass at the Jets' 20-yard line and ran it into the end zone, tying the game at 35. Of course, neither team was able to score in the first of the 2 overtimes. But Baltimore had the ball going into the second one, and after an 11-yard rush that moved them into field goal range, they ran 4 more plays just trying to get closer and make the kick easier. Justin Tucker, who was just in his rookie year, lined up for the 47-yard field goal and drilled it, giving the Ravens a 38-35 win over the Broncos. This game ended with a runtime of 76 minutes and 42 seconds, making it the 4th longest game that has ever been played. Alright, now we're getting to the really long games. The next one we have is actually the AFL Championship game that was between the Dallas Texans and the Houston Oilers in 1962, which is 62 years ago. It was a long time. At the end of the regulation, the Texans and Oilers were tied up at 17. At the beginning of overtime, Abner Hayes, Dallas's captain, said that the team will, quote, kick to the clock when they won the coin toss. This meant not only did they not get the first possession, they weren't even kicking with the wind. Luckily, Houston did not score on their first possession, so it didn't really matter in the end. After nearly 3 minutes into the second overtime, Dallas was able to get into field goal range, where another rookie, Tommy Brooker, came in and made a 25-yard field goal, giving them the win 20-17. This game went exactly 2 minutes and 54 seconds into the second overtime, giving it a runtime of 77 minutes and 54 seconds, of course, making it the second longest game of all time. And finally, we have the longest game in NFL history. The 1971 AFC Divisional Playoff game between the Miami Dolphins and the Kansas City Chiefs, often referred to as the Christmas Day Classic. The game went back and forth, with both teams trading scores throughout regulation. By the time the fourth quarter ended, the game was tied at 24, sending it to overtime. In the first overtime, Kansas City kicker John Stenerud had a chance to end it with a 31-yard field goal, but he missed it wide right. The game carried on with both teams struggling to find the end zone or put the ball between the uprights. Then, nearly halfway through the second overtime, Dolphins kicker Garo Yepremian lined up for a 37-yard field goal and nailed it, finally ending the game and giving the Dolphins the 27-24 win and sending them to the AFC Championship game. This game ended up lasting 82 minutes and 42 seconds, of course, making it the longest, and it was nearly 5 minutes longer than the last game we talked about, which was second. Alright, so that's going to do it for the longest games in NFL history, but there's one more that I wanted to include for a reason that isn't because it went super long into overtime. And this game is the 2018 season opener between the Tennessee Titans and the Miami Dolphins. This regular season game is interesting for its insane length, but not because it went into multiple overtimes. The game started normally, but with just over a minute left in the first half, lightning in the area forced the teams off the field, for what turned out to be the first of two very lengthy weather delays. This first delay lasted nearly 2 hours, and after halftime, the teams managed to squeeze in most of the third quarter before another storm rolled in. This time, the delay stretched to over 2 hours, pushing the game into the evening hours. By the time the fourth quarter was able to be played, the players, coaches, and fans were noticeably drained, but the team still had to finish the game. The Dolphins eventually came out on top, securing a 27-20 win behind a massive 102-yard kickoff return by Jakeem Grant and a 75-yard touchdown run by Kenyon Drake. While the total runtime of the actual gameplay was just 60 minutes, the game itself lasted 7 hours and 8 minutes, making it the longest game in NFL history in terms of total duration and not runtime. So that's going to do it. Some of the longest games in NFL history. Maybe we'll see some more long games in the future with the new NFL playoff overtime rules. Hopefully we get to see some because they're pretty exciting. But yeah, like I said, that's going to do it. And I have been actually thinking about branching out into covering some topics like this, but for the NBA. So if you want to see like stuff like this, like lesser talked about things, just for the NBA, just let me know, because that's something that I kind of want to do. So yeah, because I like talking about these much less talked about topics in the NFL. Yeah, so thank you for watching, and please consider subscribing.